Welcome, dear viewers. Sit back, relax, and sip your coffee. I never thought I'd end up here. Alone. In the middle of nowhere, guarding a motel that hadn't seen a guest in years. But when you're desperate for work, you don't ask too many questions. It started with a simple ad, night guard needed. Immediate start. High pay. Room included. Sounded perfect at the time. I should have known better. The motel was called the Hollow Pine Inn, an old two-story building off a forgotten stretch of highway, surrounded by dense woods that seemed to swallow the last rays of sunlight. The parking lot was cracked and empty, the neon sign above the front office flickering like it was struggling to stay alive. When I arrived, there was no formal interview. Just an envelope taped to the office door. My name scrawled across it in shaky handwriting. Inside the envelope were two things, a room key labeled 1A, and a handwritten note. 7 rules, neatly numbered, underlined twice at the top. Rules for night guard, Hollow Pine Inn. Never leave the front office after midnight. If you hear knocking at the front door, do not answer. If the phone rings more than 3 times, unplug it immediately. Check the security cameras every hour on the hour. No exceptions. If you see a guest on the cameras, even though the motel is empty, do not approach them. At exactly 3:03 a.m., close all blinds and curtains. Do not open them again until sunrise. At sunrise, walk outside. If you see footprints leading away from the building, follow them. If not, stay inside until further notice. I read the list 3 times, feeling a knot tighten in my chest. Was this some kind of joke? Who was I guarding this place from? I unlocked room 1A, dropped my duffel bag on the creaky bed, and sat staring at the note until the sun slipped behind the trees. That's when the shadows around the building seemed to grow thicker, pressing against the windows like they wanted inside. At 9 p.m., I officially started my shift. The office was dim, lit by a single buzzing overhead light. An ancient monitor displayed feeds from 6 black and white security cameras, front entrance, parking lot, lobby, second-floor hallway, back exit, and storage room. The place looked as dead as it had felt when I pulled in. Not a soul in sight. By 10 p.m., I was bored out of my mind. I checked the cameras. Nothing. Scanned the parking lot. Empty. At 11 p.m., I thought I saw movement by the back exit camera, but when I leaned closer, it was just a shadow swaying from a broken sign in the wind. But when the clock ticked toward midnight, something changed. The motel felt heavier. Like the air itself was waiting. I checked the note again, never leave the front office after midnight. Easy enough. I wasn't planning to go anywhere. At exactly 12:01 a.m., I heard it. A knock. It wasn't loud. Just 3 soft raps against the front door glass. My stomach dropped. I turned toward the door, heart hammering. Through the frosted glass, I could make out a figure standing on the other side. Unmoving. Watching. Another knock. I swallowed hard, remembering rule number 2, do not answer. I stayed frozen behind the desk. The figure didn't knock again. Didn't move. Just stood there. Minutes dragged by. The figure remained. Then the phone rang. I jolted, nearly falling out of the chair. Ring. I stared at the desk phone, its red light blinking in time with the shrill sound. Ring. My pulse raced. Ring. My hands trembled as I reached forward, eyeing the note. If the phone rings more than 3 times, unplug it immediately. It was on the 3rd ring. I hesitated. Ring. The 4th. I yanked the cord from the wall. The phone went silent. I leaned back, breathing hard, sweat trickling down my spine. I dared a glance at the door. The figure was gone. I checked the cameras, flipping through each feed. Front entrance, empty. Parking lot, empty. Lobby, empty. Second floor hallway. I froze. There was someone standing at the end of the hall. A man. Pale. Wearing a dark suit. Facing the camera directly. But the motel was supposed to be empty. I switched to the storage room camera. Nothing. Back to the hallway. He was closer. Halfway down the hall now. Still facing the camera. Still unmoving. My skin crawled. I grabbed the note again. If you see a guest on the cameras, even though the motel is empty, do not approach them. My hand hovered over the phone, forgetting it was unplugged. I flipped the monitor back to the lobby camera. The figure was now standing in the lobby. I could almost feel his gaze through the screen. And then he lifted his hand. Waved. And smiled. The monitor flickered. The screen went black. I swore under my breath, slapping the side of the monitor. It came back on. The lobby was empty again. The front door was still shut. But behind me, I heard a whisper. My blood turned cold. I spun around. Nothing there. But something had changed. The office didn't feel empty anymore. Somewhere deep in the building, I heard a door creak open. And then, faintly, footsteps. Slow. Measured. Coming closer. I backed against the desk, gripping the note like it could protect me. Outside, the night pressed harder against the windows. The wood seemed to lean closer, branches tapping the glass. I checked the time. 2:47 a.m. Only 16 more minutes until 3:03 a.m. Until I had to close every curtain and blind. Until, whatever was here, came closer. The monitor flickered again. The second floor camera showed the hallway empty. But on the lobby camera, a new figure stood at the front desk. Exactly where I was sitting. Facing the camera. Smiling. The same pale man. I turned slowly toward the office window, afraid of what I'd see. The window reflected the dim room around me. But not me. Only him. Smiling back. The moment I saw his reflection in the office window, smiling back at me when I wasn't, I stumbled backward, knocking over the chair. My breath came in ragged gasps. I blinked, hoping it was some kind of trick of the light, but the reflection remained. He was still smiling. And then, slowly, the reflection lifted a hand and pressed it flat against the glass. I hadn't moved. The handprint bloomed in the reflection, fogging the surface as if he were standing right behind the glass. But when I turned, nothing was there. The glass was clear. No smudge. No figure. I squeezed my eyes shut. "Don't break the rules," I whispered. I checked the clock, 2:58 a.m. 5 minutes until 3:03 a.m., when I was supposed to close every curtain and blind. I ran from the office into the lobby, yanking the blinds down over each window, heart thudding in my ears. The shadows outside shifted with every pull, as if something waited just beyond the glass. I reached the hallway, slamming the door shut behind me. The second floor loomed above, its staircase creaking under invisible weight. I could swear I heard footsteps moving overhead, slow and deliberate. I rushed down the hall, closing blinds in every empty guest room. Room after room, I pulled the curtains tight, feeling a cold draft that seemed to follow me no matter how fast I moved. 3:01 a.m. Almost there. I sprinted back to the lobby, where the last curtain by the front entrance remained open. Outside, the parking lot stretched empty under a flickering lamp. But something dark lingered at the edge of the light, a shape just out of focus, hunched and waiting. My hands fumbled with the curtain cord. 3:02 a.m. The shape took a step forward. The light above the parking lot hissed and popped, casting the figure into deeper shadow. I yanked the curtain close just as the light went out completely, plunging the outside into black. Silence fell. I stood frozen in the darkened lobby, listening. My breath came in short bursts. My pulse roared in my ears. Then, a soft knock against the glass. I backed away from the window, gripping the rule sheet like a lifeline. Rule 2, if you hear knocking at the front door, do not answer. I whispered it again. The knock came again. And again. And then, scraping. As if nails were being dragged down the outside of the glass. I pressed myself against the wall, eyes darting toward the office. The monitors glowed faintly in the darkness. I had forgotten to check them at 3 a.m., I had missed the hour. My stomach twisted with dread. I ran back to the office, flicking through the camera feeds. The lobby was empty. The parking lot, empty. The back exit, nothing. Second floor hallway. I froze. The man in the suit was there again. Only this time, he wasn't at the end of the hall. He was standing inches from the camera lens. His pale face filled the screen, his black eyes locked onto mine as if he could see me through the monitor. His mouth moved silently. I leaned closer, unable to look away. His lips formed a single word. Run. And then the screen went black. Every monitor shut off. The lights overhead flickered once. And died. I stood in total darkness. Then, from the hallway. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Getting closer. I scrambled to find the flashlight in the drawer, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. The beam flicked on, cutting a narrow circle through the dark. The footsteps stopped outside the office door. Silence. Then. A soft knock. 3 times. I backed into the corner, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. The door creaked open an inch. I held my breath. The crack widened. A hand reached inside, pale, thin fingers curling around the doorframe. Then a voice. Soft. Calm. You missed the hour. The door swung open. But there was no one there. Just darkness stretching down the hall. I stepped forward, shining the light into the empty corridor. And then I saw it. Footprints. Wet, muddy footprints leading away from the office. They weren't mine. They trailed down the hall, up the staircase, vanishing into the second floor. I stared at them, heart pounding. Then I remembered Rule 7, at sunrise, walk outside. If you see footprints leading away from the building, follow them. If not, stay inside until further notice. But sunrise was still hours away. And the footprints were already here. Leading deeper into the motel. The flashlight flickered. A whisper drifted down from the second floor. Don't wait until morning. The air grew colder. And as I stood trembling in the doorway, I realized something terrible. The rules were never meant to protect me. They were meant to keep me here. The footprints taunted me. Damp, heavy imprints across the dusty floor, leading deeper into the motel's guts. They were too large to be mine, too fresh to be old stains. I stood at the threshold, flashlight trembling in my grip, the air pressed tight around me like a vice. Somewhere upstairs, a faint shuffle echoed. I glanced at the clock, 3:15 a.m. Still hours until sunrise. Still trapped inside this place. My gaze flicked to the crumpled rules in my other hand. 7 rules. 7 fragile lifelines. But now the rules felt like chains. Outside the windows, a wind had picked up, rattling the shutters and hissing through cracks in the wood. Something about it wasn't natural, it didn't howl like wind. It whispered. My flashlight beam followed the footprints toward the staircase. The first step creaked under an invisible weight. Another shuffle above. I wanted to stay in the office. Wanted to barricade the door, hide beneath the desk, and wait for dawn. But the rules, the cursed rules, kept echoing in my head. At sunrise, if you see footprints, follow them. But the footprints were already here. What happens if I follow them now? And worse, what happens if I don't? I swallowed the lump in my throat and stepped onto the first stair. It groaned beneath me. The motel felt alive now, its walls breathing, its bones creaking. Every step felt like sinking deeper into something ancient and waiting. At the top of the stairs, the footprints veered down the hallway, stopping in front of room 208. The door stood ajar, a faint light spilling from the crack like a soft pulse. I approached slowly. My own reflection shimmered in the dusty brass number plate. The footprints stopped at the threshold. Inside, the room glowed with a flickering yellow light. An old lamp on the nightstand sputtered against the dark. And sitting on the bed was the man in the black suit. He didn't look up. Just sat there, hands folded in his lap, staring at the opposite wall. His pale skin stretched taut over sharp cheekbones, lips pressed in a thin line. I froze in the doorway. "Who are you?" I whispered. His head tilted slightly, acknowledging me without turning. "I was like you once," he said softly. "Before the rules." My blood chilled. "The rules, they keep you here?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "No. The rules bind you here." I stepped into the room, heart thudding. "What's happening to me?" He finally turned his head, black eyes gleaming like oil pools under the flickering lamp. "You're not guarding this motel," he said. "You're feeding it." I swallowed hard. "Feeding it, what?" He rose from the bed slowly, his frame impossibly tall beneath the low ceiling. "Your fear. Your obedience. Every rule you follow, every ritual you complete, it makes the motel stronger." My mouth went dry. "Then why tell me? Why not let me keep following them?" He stepped closer, shadows clinging to his suit like smoke. "Because I'm tired. And now, it's your turn." Before I could move, he placed something cold and heavy in my hand. A small brass key. "Room 1A. My room." "You're the new caretaker," he whispered. Then he faded. Literally, faded. His outline blurred, his body unraveling into wisps of dark mist that coiled into the corners of the room before vanishing completely. The lamp sputtered once more, and went out. I stood alone in the dark, the key burning ice-cold in my palm. And then the whisper came again. From everywhere. From the walls. From beneath the floorboards. Rule 8. I spun, scanning the shadows. "What?" The voice whispered again, louder this time. "There's an 8th rule." My skin prickled. "What's the 8th rule?" Silence. Then a soft knock on the door behind me. I turned slowly. The door to room 208 had shut while I wasn't looking. A slip of paper was pinned to the wood by a rusty nail. I approached cautiously, plucking it free. Scrawled in shaky handwriting. "Rule 8, if you're told there's an 8th rule, it's already too late." My stomach lurched. Behind me, the lamp flickered back on, casting a pool of dim light. And in the center of the bed where the man had sat was a pile of my clothes. Neatly folded. My name embroidered into the collar of the shirt. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the paper. The whisper returned, curling around me like a noose. "Welcome, caretaker." The lamp flickered one last time. And went out. Plunging me into darkness. The darkness felt alive. It pressed in from every side, dense and suffocating, as if the walls themselves were breathing around me. My flashlight flickered back to life, its weak beam trembling over the bed. The pile of clothes was still there, folded impossibly neat. My name stitched into the shirt's collar stared back at me like a taunt. I gripped the brass key tighter, feeling its cold weight dig into my palm. "Caretaker," I whispered. The word tasted wrong in my mouth. From the hallway came a distant scraping sound, soft but steady, like something being dragged across the floor. It was moving closer. I backed away from the bed, out into the corridor, flashlight sweeping left and right. The footprints were gone. In their place, faint scratch marks lined the floorboards, as if claws had raked across the wood. The scraping stopped. Silence. Then, from the shadows at the end of the hall, a figure stepped forward. It wasn't the man in the black suit. This figure was taller, its body impossibly thin, stretched as if pulled by invisible strings. Its skin was a pale, waxy gray, gleaming slightly under the flashlight. Its face. There wasn't a face. Only a smooth expanse of skin where features should have been. And in its hand, it held a key identical to mine. I stumbled backward, heart hammering against my ribs. The figure tilted its head slowly, like a curious dog, then raised a long, bony finger to where its lips would be. A shushing gesture. Then it pointed behind me. I spun around, flashlight beam slicing through empty air. The door to room 1A stood open at the end of the opposite hallway. Faint, flickering light spilled from inside, like candlelight wavering in a breeze. When I turned back to the faceless figure, it was gone. The hallway was empty again. I swallowed the knot rising in my throat and forced myself forward. Each step felt heavier than the last, the motel shifting around me, hallways bending impossibly, doors I'd closed earlier now wide open. By the time I reached room 1A, the candlelight inside had dimmed to a faint glow. I stepped inside. The room was nothing like the others. The walls were lined with mirrors, floor to ceiling, every surface reflecting me back at 100 angles. A single chair sat in the center of the room, and on the chair, the rule sheet. Not crumpled. Not old. Clean. Crisp. A fresh copy. But now, there were 8 rules. My throat tightened as I picked it up. Lock the doors at midnight. Close all blinds by 3:03 a.m. Never answer a knock at the front door. Don't use the phone after 2 a.m. Check the cameras every hour on the hour. Never open room 208. At sunrise, if you see footprints, follow them. Don't take the key. I stared at the last line, my blood going cold. The brass key in my hand seemed heavier now, the grooves biting into my skin. I'd already taken it. A whisper rose from the mirrors, a dozen voices overlapping, all sounding like mine. You've broken the 8th rule. The door slammed shut behind me. The candle flickered violently. My reflections in the mirrors began to change. In one mirror, my face melted into a faceless blur. In another, my skin peeled away in ribbons. In a third, I was smiling, too wide, teeth too sharp, eyes black and hollow. I staggered backward, the reflections shifting faster now, cycling through impossible versions of myself. Then they all froze. Every mirror showed the same image. Me, sitting in the chair. Holding the key. Smiling. The real chair was empty. I turned to flee, but the door had vanished, replaced by another mirror. My panicked reflection stared back, hands pressed against the glass. The voices rose again. Caretaker, caretaker, caretaker. I banged my fists against the mirror. Let me out. The candle's flame surged, filling the room with blinding light. And then, darkness. When my vision cleared, I was sitting in the chair. The key lay in my lap. And the mirrors. The mirrors were empty. No reflections. Only dark glass. A knock sounded behind me. 3 soft raps. I didn't turn. I couldn't turn. I stared at the key, heart sinking deeper into a pit of dread. Another knock. Louder. Caretaker, a voice whispered from the other side of the mirror. It's your shift now. The candle flickered out. And in the black, the voices began to chant. Caretaker, caretaker, caretaker. Over. And over. And over. The candle's absence left a deeper darkness, not merely a lack of light, but a void that felt thick and crushing, as though the room itself had swallowed the last flicker of hope. I sat frozen in the chair, the brass key heavy in my lap, its chill sinking into my skin. Around me, the mirrors stood still and empty, no reflections, no distortions. Just dark glass, blank as midnight. The knocking had stopped. But the voices hadn't. Caretaker, caretaker, caretaker. Their chant faded into a low hum, vibrating beneath my skin, resonating in the bones of the motel itself. I don't know how long I sat there. Time had dissolved, swallowed by the motel's impossible space. Then, softly, a single knock. Followed by a voice. Not whispering now. Speaking clearly. Firm. Familiar. You can leave. I stood up so fast the chair toppled behind me, its wooden legs cracking against the floor. The key burned in my hand now, branding my palm with its shape. The mirror in front of me wasn't empty anymore. It showed the motel's front lobby. The front door wide open. Soft morning light spilling through. I ran. Straight toward the mirror. The moment I touched the glass, it rippled beneath my fingers like the surface of a pond. I pushed harder, until the darkness peeled away, until the coldness of the motel's night air vanished into something warmer, brighter. And I stumbled into the lobby. The sun was rising. Or so it seemed. The front door stood open, just like in the mirror. Beyond it lay the gravel parking lot, my car parked exactly where I'd left it. I could hear birds. Feel the warmth of sunlight on my face. I ran toward the door. But just as I crossed the threshold, everything stopped. The air froze mid-breath. The birds fell silent. The sunlight dimmed, flickered, and blinked out like a dying bulb. I turned around. The motel wasn't behind me anymore. Only endless desert. Flat. Empty. A pale, colorless sky stretching overhead. And in the middle of that barren nothing stood a single signpost. I approached it slowly, dread curling in my stomach. The sign read, Caretaker's Motel, Vacancy. And beneath it, a smaller sign swung gently in the still air. Now hiring. I stepped back. My car was gone. The gravel lot was gone. The motel itself had vanished. Only the sign remained. And the moment I read it again, the key in my hand began to glow. A low rumble echoed beneath my feet. I turned, and there it was. The motel. Rebuilt behind me. Standing exactly as it had been the night I arrived. The neon sign flickered to life above the front entrance. Vacancy. The lobby lights snapped on. And at the front desk was me. I watched myself from across the lot, standing behind the counter, clipboard in hand, eyes hollow and distant. Waiting. The motel doors swung open. A car pulled into the lot. A new guard stepped out. Young. Nervous. Carrying a backpack. I recognized the look in his eyes. I recognized everything. I wanted to scream. To warn him. But as he crossed the threshold into the motel, the doors shut behind him. And the key in my hand dissolved into ash. A whisper drifted on the wind, soft and final. Caretaker. The neon sign buzzed. The desert stretched forever. And the sun never rose again. End.